Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Catalyst Energies. My name is Dee. Thank you for joining me. I'm so grateful that you're here. This is the full moon astrology report. We're going to look at this weekend because we have a full moon in Aquarius happening tomorrow. So we're going to look at today's astrology, tomorrow's astrology, Saturday's astrology, Sunday's astrology, and then we're going to look at the overall and general theme of the last half of this lunar cycle. So looking at the third quarter moon squaring the sun and then leading up to the next new moon, which is going to be on August 8th, and it is going to be at 16 to 17 degrees Leo. And actually, what's very interesting about this is that we're going to have two Aquarian full moons in these next two cycles. So this full moon is going to be at 1 to 2 degrees Aquarius, and the next full moon that starts with a Leo new moon is going to be at the very last degree of Aquarius. So Aquarian energy is really very present now. And of course, our good friend Saturn is going to be front and center for us as per usual when well, with anything, you know what I mean? Like with anything, there is no getting around the reality of reality and material reality. So, but we do know that if you're following this channel, then we do absolutely know that it's not the end of the line, right? That there is more to our existence than just the physical reality that we are interacting with in this particular lifetime. So welcome back. Welcome if you're new to this channel. And as always, whenever you interact with this content, it actually does support independent content creators like myself who are not sponsored, who do not buy views, who do not have bots. Did you know that in terms of analytics, it's about a 1%. 1% of your subscription audience is commenting and interacting with your videos. That's like an organic interaction there. So it's just something to think about when you look at people's followings, their subscription count, and how many people are regularly interacting with that content. That's going to show you a lot about who is actually propping up that channel and that content creator, if in fact they have an organic following. It's just something to consider as we move through these times that is so nebulous and really a war on our consciousness, huh? So whenever you interact with this content, whenever you interact with this content in subscriptions, liking, commenting, sharing this content, whether you're on BitChute or YouTube or any other platform you find this content on either now or in the future, it does actually support the growth of the channel and the spreading of the message. So if you find it inspirational or helpful, there's a good chance that somebody else in your life or somebody else out there is going to feel the same way. And that's how we come together as a community, as a collective, and we share ideas. So no intuitive transmission for today or tomorrow for that matter. We usually do the astrology for the week on Fridays during this time, but I'm going to be going off the grid for the full moon. And I suggest that if you have the opportunity to do the same, because this is going to really show us this full moon, just like they all do. They show us it's a culmination from the new moon intentions that we set, and we see what it is that we need to release, what it is that we are most of the time not fully aware of, that's operating in our subconscious and in these deeper intuitive senses. They come up and are illuminated, right? There's a reflection back from the moon as a result of the sun's light, and we're going to see if we have the ability to really balance ourselves in the midst of a really rapid spread of, possibly light, certainly a combustion type of event that spreads through the collective. So I'm going to go into all of these details here as we go through this. But the main imagery that came forward for this full moon that I want to share is because we are dealing with Aquarius, right? Let's break down Aquarius real quick here. So Aquarius, the water bearer, right? The cosmic coherence. We talked about this yesterday, right? Because their star card was at the center of our reading, right? At that axis point between our energetic polarity and the linear cause and effect relationship that we experience outside of us. The heart chakra is that axis point of those two realms, so to speak. And we had the star card at the center here. So we talked about Aquarius yesterday in that context, but the water bearer, the ability to hold the intuitive feeling-based knowledge within us. Moon in Aquarius, and we're going to see that we still have to get through the moon in the rest of Capricorn right now today, because we don't even have our ingress into Aquarius until tomorrow night, right? And then the full moon is going to be later tomorrow night, 10:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So Aquarius is about maintaining that that containment system, kind of like Cancer energy, but for the entire collective. The collective itself is the container that holds the water, that is the collective, right? The energy that is pervasive through all life. Aquarius represents the power and the energy that moves through that cohesive collective, and it is in opposition to Leo, which is why we have a full moon, because today the sun moves into Leo. There's a lot of changes that are happening in the next day or so. A lot of planets changing positions, right? Moving into new signs, right? Venus in Virgo, Sun moving into Leo. Saturn has now retrograded back into the previous degree. Jupiter soon moving into Aquarius as well. There's all shifting and changing right now, and the archetypes that are represented by these planets and these objects moving into different signs, the resonance of what they stand for, it's going to change, and you're gonna notice shifting in all of these different areas. And of course, with Saturn moving now into the next degree in its retrograde in Aquarius, we're gonna feel that really strongly too, especially because there's going to be some very distinct oppositions with Saturn in the next 2 weeks that are with Mercury is going to move into Leo. The Sun obviously is moving into Leo today. They're going to both be in opposition to Saturn at some point. Venus in an opposition to Jupiter. Mars that will be in opposition to Jupiter as well. There's a lot of tension here in this dynamic of individual sovereign nature that Leo represents, and the essence of the collective and its cohesion of individual sovereign expressive people. So we're going to talk about all of these dynamics, but it's really the imagery of this full moon that came to me is, a level, right? When you're trying to make sure that something is level. And the little bubble that's in the middle, right? This is the full moon. Are we going to be able to keep that little bubble as us, right? In the midst of all of that fluid that's like, whoa, all over the place, shifting and changing and unexpectedly shifting and changing. Are we going to be able to keep our center in the midst of that? And we're going to see with the full moon, each of us having this personalized experience and a deep feeling experience, and seeing what is often hidden from us in our subconscious. Maybe not so much with some people, depending on how much regular work you're doing with your subconscious. We're going to see what it is that we're made of. Are we going to be able to keep that bubble balanced and level in the midst of moving around? How are we going to balance that? That full moon really is us as that little bubble in the level, and what we are going to do about it when things start turning, when things start shifting, if things start moving around, right? That it's unexpected. And it's not so much that it actually is unexpected, because the opposition of 2 degrees of Aquarius in Leo is really the spread of the individual experience, and reminding us that nothing exists in a vacuum, even our own personal experience. So even when we have our own kind of awakening moment, it spreads through the collective. Like we are inextricably linked with each other and all of life. And so there's no way that it doesn't have an impact. And sometimes we can't necessarily plan for all potentials, because that is in the essence chaos theory, right? One change in a variable in the original system can change the entire system. And so even there is like a tipping point perhaps where there's a personalized awakening experience on individual levels, and it's like a cascading effect, and it will in fact create some sort of shift in the collective dynamic. some of it not really necessarily anticipated. And for everything that humanity is able to create as a result of their cohesion, nature can take away in a hot second. And so we're going to see what that looks like from a personal and intuitive and even a subconscious view with this full moon. I also think it's important that we go back and revisit for just a moment here what this new moon represented that is now leading to this culmination of the full moon. Remember the new moon in Cancer, right? The ritualization of some sort of productive relationship. Now remember the Cancer archetype. It is about the cohesion, again, there's this word again, cohesion, and the consolidation of power, but it is what allows the individual consciousness to find a stabilization. This is where the character really develops in the individual's journey through the astrological wheel, right? The Cancer archetype does represent cardinal water, right? That there is momentum that is created by the linking of this familial matrix, whatever that represents to us. And we've been talking about the spiritual community, the family matrix, our local communities, our heritage, our nation. Those are all representative of the Cancer archetype in the fourth house. Usually it's the family of origin or where you're from, but it does extend to any of these types of containment systems that represent where we're loyal to, who we're faithful to, what supports us while we support it, right? It's an interactive type of system, but in the Cancer archetype, we are still talking about the individual's development. And so we were invited in a lot of ways with this new moon to ritualize and sanctify some measure of productive relationship within us, within the polarity within us, in order to create something, right? In order to create the container system for the eventual energy of Leo, right? And with the sun moving into Leo today, it's home territory, it's rulership. This is where the expression of who we are really starts to wake up, right? And so it's important to realize what we sanctified and what we came to, and what the intention that we set with the new moon, because like it or love it, we can't contend with necessarily all of the things that come up. And so if we look at that situation like an actual marriage, right? Because the Sabian symbol is a priest performing a marriage ceremony. So we're looking at it in terms of we've made a decision to link ourselves in this productive relationship. So you can use the framework of an actual marriage to understand this. You can look at it as a business relationship. You can look at it as any kind of like intentional linking that allows for consolidation of power and that holds us and our emotional vulnerability so that our character develops. So we've made this decision, hopefully. Everybody was invited to do it consciously. Not everybody did it consciously, but people certainly on a collective level have come to ritualize and sanctify some measure of productive relationship within them. Now, we will be challenged along the way if we're in a marriage, right? It's not going to be perfect all of the time. In fact, it's when it's not perfect that we learn the most. And we may find ourselves wanting to, in the face of this full moon, seeing the unexpected outcome of the spread of our awakening experience, because it's that relationship in the containment system of Cancer that allows us to fully express ourselves individually. It is what stabilizes us. It gives us a container. And then when we come into Leo, right, which is the next step in the zodiacal wheel, we wake up, right? Individually, it is what spurs our passion. It gives us a container in which to express ourselves. So if you think about it in terms of a marriage, for instance, and what a marriage really traditionally is meant to be, which is to create progeny, to create a family, to create the next generation within a containment system of emotional support and nurturing and caring, right? That is the maternal archetype. So we do realize here that it's not all going to be sunshine and rainbows. And in fact, that's part of why we ritualize and sanctify this relationship, because if we make it sacred, then we will revere it regardless of how it the challenges that are presented to us. And there will be challenges. And so we're going to see very clearly what it is we need to let go of, what it is that has culminated, that we're like, yes, this is going to actually assist in this process when we get to the full moon. And of course, Aquarius is innovative, futuristic, outside of the box, humanitarian. It's about the cohesion of the collective in itself. And we're going to see if we can stay balanced internally and emotionally in the midst of an upheaval. And if we can go back to the original intention of this new moon, why we made this ritual, why we allowed for this ritualization process, why we decided to sanctify this relationship of polarity within us, then we can go back and realize, realize and renew your vows, for instance, right? You go back and realize what you committed to. And it's not going to be easy. I know that a couple of days ago, I had a dream that was very much about this. Like, I don't want to, there was part of me that's just like, I am really resistant to getting married, right? Is all symbolic. And I went through it anyway. So there is going to be this resistance. And that already happened with the first quarter moon in a square to the sun. That was our crisis in action. And we'll have another opportunity with the waning square of a crisis in consciousness based on what we discover with this full moon. So let's just get right into the charts and start looking at them. If that's really what if you really are a visual person and you like looking at the charts, this is why I do it. Otherwise, I explain it very detailed along the way so that you can listen while you're doing other things. And I really think I do a lot of that myself, actually. So I find that very valuable. And that's why I cater to multiple styles of information, communication and dissemination, because a lot of people learn and absorb information and process information in different ways. We're all very much different. So let's just get right into the chart so we can see what's going on today, because our moon is still in Capricorn. So we don't want to get too ahead of ourselves here while we go through this process. So I hope everyone's doing well, taking very good care of ourselves. And all right. So here we are with today's transits, and we are going to start here. And there's a lot of starseed activation too. So let's start, number one, with the fact that the sun is now coming into Leo today. It's at the last degree of Cancer as of right now. So it's in just a number of minutes or hours really, it's going to move into Leo. Leo is the rulership of the sun. It is its home territory. And this is blood rushing to the head. This is the first activation and combustion of the Kundalini energy. And so we're going to find that, here that as we go through this next month of Leo, Leo season is the same every year, right? This is the time of year that, we are in full bloom, essentially, and we are expressing ourselves through this full bloom. And this is the Kundalini awakening, right? And so if we go back to the new moon again, and we also go back to the fact that Mars and Venus were in a conjunction at 20 degrees Leo, which represents this reverence for the sun, right? These two coming together in this sacred union to really exemplify what we committed to each personally with the new moon. They come together in the territory of revering and I don't want to say worshiping, because that's not the right word, but in reverence for this incredible solar energy that leads to the creation of new life, essentially, right? The sun, as our star, is responsible for all life on this planet. Now, you can't have life without water, and the moon is an essential part of the regulation of the tides and the flow of water on this planet. So they're not you can't take one away from the other, but we do know that the sun is responsible and gives devotionally, unconditionally. And so where Venus and Mars came together, it was in this reverence for what the sun actually represents. It was a really good opportunity to actually activate in real time the Empress and the Emperor coming together to create something, to create this flow of dynamic energy through their union, which was what we set the stage for and created a container for with the new moon within us. And so now that the sun is actually here in Leo, it's going to turn on. We're going to express ourselves through this dynamic. So you can feel that shift happening today. What else is happening today? Like I said, the moon is still in Capricorn right here, and we'll go through these transits for today. I think it's important. The other thing that I want to point out, speaking of our new moon position, this is where Mercury is today, 19 degrees Cancer. A priest performing a marriage ceremony. So we have this next layer here in the realm of our mind, our mental conception, and our nervous system, the way we interact with information and processing of information. We're going to have a mental perspective of the new moon, the energy of the new moon. And so Mercury being here, we get to engage with this from a very intellectual perspective, right? From a mental perspective, through our intellect, through our communication, and really just, our actual nervous system. So this is another layer of reminding us and allowing us to, with Mercury being the magician in some ways, especially Mercury in both Gemini and Virgo, Mercury being the magician, we are able to manifest. We can tap into our manifestation potential of this new moon intention, which was really just setting the seed, right? Planting the seed, putting the intention behind it for its growth over the course of the lunar cycle. And so now with Mercury kind of visiting this position, we are able to tap into our manifestation power for this sanctification. It's kind of like a reminder, and it also allows us to conceptualize this when with the new moon, it was much more about an energetic intention. And now it's something that we can actually act on with our manifestation power, which is what Mercury really represents. This is a really, it just blows my mind in so many ways how these cycles really do support things as they're going along. And it's just so well timed. It blows my mind. This is why I've devoted my life to this practice. So where are we at with the rest of it? Okay. Let's see here. We also see that Venus has moved into Virgo today. Now, let me explain something about this. Venus, her rulership is Taurus and Libra, right? We've talked about this a lot. She's exalted in Pisces, right? Which means that Virgo is her fall position. What does that mean? That means her power and her influence is diminished when they are in their detriment or when they're in their fall position. Venus in Virgo is in her fall position, right? Venus is exalted in Pisces because in Pisces, now think about this, Venus is the feminine principle of in a material form, right? And so she is the Empress. She is receptive. She is, in fact, the fertile ground in which growth happens. She is the attractor. She is magnetic. She pulls towards her what is comfortable and harmonious, right? She doesn't really act. She doesn't really represent the act of doing anything. She is what holds the potential and the medium for the growth, right? So in some ways we're like, oh, Virgo, it's another earth sign. So she feels comfortable here, right? Venus can relate to earth energy because in fact Taurus is her rulership. Because Virgo is ruled by Mercury and there is a mutability. That means that there's a shifting and a changing and an analysis that has to go along with being in Virgo. It is the path of discipleship, which requires action on some level. Analysis and intuition, they're inseparable in Virgo, but there is action. So Venus, she doesn't, in Pisces, she gets to just be herself in the midst of all of this dreamy and imaginative and creative, and all of the Pisces, just being directly connected in love and compassion. And she really, really enjoys and is in a lot of has a lot of power in that place, because she's not acting on anything. She just gets to be in the midst of the muse, essentially, right? This is a good place for Venus. So, but in Virgo, in the words of RuPaul, girl, you better work. And that is something that she does not want to do. So there's going to be a little bit of resistance here, I think, until we kind of get used to what this represents, because it's going to come in our relationships, material reality. Like, we're going to have to actually learn the lesson of significant form. It was one thing to be all, hot and bothered in Leo, right? Like the passion and the expression and the harnessing of that deep energy that is the Kundalini, for instance, that moves through us, the blood pumping through our system, right? That is total combustion and release of our solar energy. She loved that. Now she has to actually put it into a form and actually be, meticulous and discriminating and, do the work. And Venus doesn't want to do the work necessarily. So it's going to really require us to kind of buckle down a little bit, okay, as she moves through Virgo, if we really do want to reconstitute what it is we value in our lives, which is what Venus really represents. So there's another shift in energy. So we have the sun coming into Leo and its rulership, Venus moving into her fall position in Virgo, and Saturn has now moved into the 10th to 11th degree of Aquarius. And so because it's a slower moving planet, when it shifts degrees in terms of Sabian symbols, you can really feel the shift in that pattern, that energetic pattern that each of these Sabian symbols represents, right? It's this beautiful mandala. Each degree has its own archetype. Each decan has its own archetype that's shown in the tarot. Each sign has its own archetype. Each house has its own archetype, right? It just spreads and spreads and spreads into this beautiful fractal, this geometric pattern. And so it's just as impactful to move degrees with these larger transpersonal planets as it is for them to shift signs in some ways. So we know that Saturn is retrograde. It's in its co-rulership of Aquarius. It's very powerful here. And now we are being we're bumping up against the wall of needing silence in order to gain new inspiration, right? We went from this place of recognizing that we're all on a different step on the journey through our ascension. And now we are in a position where we're going back, right? We're going back over this territory that Saturn is in its retrograde. And now we are being, like I said, we're pushing up against the wall that's like, we're not going to, we have to actually silence ourselves. We have to get into a quiet mode if we want to receive pure inspiration from the collective, for instance, right? Because again, Aquarius is about the humanitarian collective, the cohesion of all of these individual sovereign people together, and the power that can move through that. We have to silence the chatter, right? If we want to be able to think outside of the box, if we want to get the insight that allows us to move forward into the future, to evolve essentially into our ascended selves, we are going to be bumping up against this wall within us where there's nothing more that we can really take from outside of us other than getting quiet, getting still, and really allowing very pure insight to come through. This is where Saturn is now. And we're going to see that when the sun and Mercury both coming into Leo, and over the course of the next 2 weeks, this opposition with Saturn in Aquarius with an Aquarius full moon on top of it, There's going to be a lot of power plays here, right? There's going to be a lot of tension between the ego and the expression of the individual, and being able to quiet ourselves in order to get inspiration from something that is transcending our own ego mind. And remember that Leo, for all of the beautiful energy that it represents, and the unconditional devotional giving of the combustion of our solar nature, it does represent ego consciousness and the structure of the ego in its rebirth. And if it is not well aspected, if it is not done, and this is what happens when people have Kundalini awakenings without any kind of framework. And even if they do have it, it's still intense, right? This is where people really fall off. And also too, this is the area of true conceit, true narcissism, true, focus on only the self, right? And being the center of your universe to the point where you don't even realize anyone else exists. So we're going to be tested on this too, because of this opposition we're going to experience with the Sun and Mercury. And there's going to be a Mercury Cazimi in Leo. And then they're both going to come and oppose Saturn right after that. So there's a huge opportunity for illumination that's coming big time. And then right after that, we're going to hit that wall again. And it's like, it's one thing to have this like brilliant illumination and this expressive, passionate energy moving through us up into our mind. You know what I mean? Like a full awakening moment in some ways. And it's very much about moving through the darkness and having access to the dawn again, right? And again, though, there's going to be that opposition. So we'll get there. There's so many dynamics that are all weaving together as part of this. It's really easy for me to get ahead of myself, but I want to make sure that we at least cover the weekend so that we know what's coming with this full moon and what to kind of expect right after its full culmination. So we do, like I said, with Sun coming into Leo, Venus coming into Virgo, Saturn shifting into the new degree, Neptune shifting into a new degree. We've gone from this position now where the veil has dropped and we have no choice but to see very clearly that we are responsible for focalizing our attention on what is right in front of us in order to prepare for the next cycle, right? The end of Pisces is when things really start to dissipate. But as it gets closer and closer, like that last decan of Pisces, as we are now consolidating back to the seed point of the next cycle at the beginning of Aries, we're starting to pull it all together and consolidate it and then give of ourselves. So Neptune is retrograde. So the fog machine got turned off and now we are seeing things very clearly, even though at the same time, all of the boundaries being dissolved by Neptune. It's forcing us to see this situation for what it is if we aren't like keeping our heads in the sand or engaged in some form of like escapism or addiction, which is absolutely a possibility and is absolutely happening. So Neptune again moves into its next degree in its retrograde. So it's even moving slower, which means this shift is going to be even more impactful over time. And it's about the ability to give of ourselves and our own vital energy to substantiate either our conscious ideals or our unconscious desires. That's something that we're going to have to come to terms with. And Neptune doesn't care if you know the difference or not. It's just going to infuse us with the ability to give of ourselves to substantiate something. So this is also shifting today. And it's just part of this larger dynamic of all of these pieces moving now, right? All of the different cogs in the clock have moved to their next position, and it changes the frequency entirely. So that's something to consider. If you're feeling like, okay, something really massive just like locked into place, it's because all of these things have shifted now into new locations. And we still have our moon in Capricorn. So let's look at that as well. Also, let's point out some things here. Number one, Venus is in opposition to Jupiter now. in Virgo. So she's in her fall position. Jupiter is in its co-rulership in Pisces, even though it's retrograde. So these two pulling on each other, right? Where Jupiter is expanding within us it's like Jupiter is a manager, okay? Jupiter is a manager. And is able to manage the collective social conditions in Pisces, right? And so what Jupiter is doing is just like, look, I'm going to make this farmer's market even bigger, right? I'm going to make it even bigger within you. There's going to be so much more to choose from. There are so many more vendors. There's so many more options, and it's within us, right? Jupiter is managing that space and making the decision to expand these potentials within us. Now, in opposition to Venus, that is just like, okay, but I have to actually make a choice about where I'm going to go. I have to actually give this whole farmer's market some form in my own I have to figure out which stand has got the best produce or the best products, right? I have to discern and discriminate based on all of these options, what is going to be the most valuable for me, right? And that, again, relationships, projects, anything of material value, financial value, anything of value in our material world that allows us to feel safe and comfortable and secure. And relationships are absolutely part of this. We have to learn to discern what exactly it is that we want to, utilize for that value. What is valuable to us, and where are we going to put our energy in terms of developing and growing ourselves and our relationships and what's valuable to us. So you can see right there that opposition. And these are two benefic, and they're at 0 degrees, right? They're at the essence of each of these signs. And so we're really being called to, and I talked about this yesterday, called to the carpet here in terms of we have all the options within us, the entire realm of the Akash within us that Jupiter is managing and certainly advocating. He's like, look, everything you'd ever want, it's all here within you, right? And the trick with Venus and why this opposition is actually very helpful right now is that she is just like, I don't want to, I'm not in my best when I have to make these decisions, but it's kind of it's a necessity. It's imperative that we do so. But we don't want to completely let go of all of the potential, right? We don't want to let go completely of this expansive space within us because we're going to start discerning and be very discriminatory about what it is that we value and where we're going to put that energy. We want to find the fulcrum. So this is a good opportunity to do that, to start kind of buckling down, even though and we can pull towards us what it is, right? The intuitive part of Virgo is something Venus is going to be very good at, right? And the sensitivity to things. So use that to your advantage while also acknowledging that the active part of analysis is going to be a little bit more difficult for that part of us, right? So there's a lot to be gained from this opposition here in terms of really starting to acknowledge and work on what it is that's valuable to us in the face of all of these they keep expanding, like it's endless, all of the options of what we can engage with. Beyond that, we have Mars in its quincunx now to Pluto retrograde. So Venus already came along this point. Now Mars is here in Leo, right? The rainbow, the rainbow after the heavy storm, and Mars is just like, yes, I see the rainbow. I'm going to act on this link, this bridge. I'm going to follow the rainbow bridge. I am going to act on and be infused by, in some ways, this realization that my earthly vessel is linked with my higher self, and I'm going to be a spiritual warrior based on that, right? No fear. And of course, the quincunx, as they all are, is this opportunity to adjust ourselves. And, Pluto being Pluto is just like, yep. You have all of this. You have all of this incredible energy and this realization, and you're going to act on it as a spiritual warrior. Just so you know, and we've talked about this endlessly, I am pulling back the curtain even more. I am excavating even more to these undercurrents that are really so deeply embedded in the collective unconscious, the institutions of our very fabric of reality here that we live within. We're going to show you the undercurrents and how they're really much more responsible for what's going on than we ever considered. So again, we may have a lot of optimism and a lot of passion and expression here, and a lot of realization about how we can act on, this, the realization of the linking here that this represents, the rainbow. What we'll be forced to adjust ourselves is we still have to contend with the transformative, very powerful reality of Pluto, right? And so Pluto and Mars, they both co-rule Scorpio, and so there is some familiarity with each other. But at the end of the day, the god of war is on the surface and acting, whereas Pluto is in fact the ruler of the underworld and is responsible for something so much deeper. And they will force us to adjust ourselves. This is constantly happening. I feel like that we keep vacillating back and forth of just like this awareness and this opening and this just like, awakening moment. And then we have to turn back and be like, oh God, what is happening? And it's so spelled out here, and it's giving us opportunities to be that bubble, to be the bubble in the level, right? Are we going to find that pocket of balance while everything is upended in a way that's meant to transform us, right? And remember, Pluto is retrograde, and it's actually at the degree that it was in mid-February, right? When the second impeachment was happening, and that whole process, President Trump was acquitted, and they didn't vote to impeach, and there was and that was when we had that stellium in Aquarius, and Jupiter and Mercury were in a conjunction with each other in Aquarius. It was like it opened a time portal, and it was like a quantum leap forward. But at the same time, we were also having to contend with very deeply the swamp under the surface, right? And now we're doing that again, except we have to pull it up from ourselves. We have to pull up and excavate so we can see the undercurrents of that energy within us, and that has been really hard. So while Mars is just like, yes, I understand my divine nature, and I see it, and I understand the link, and I see a representation that it's all going to be okay, and Mars is ready to act on that. Again, the quincunx is going to be like, yes, that's important, and this adjustment is not, it's not that it's good or bad. It's just they're not fitting together. And so we have to adjust ourselves in order to make sense of this, okay? These are what these inconjuncts, the green lines, that's what they represent. So it's not easy. And then the sun moves into Leo. So let's start talking about the moon, because number one, we can see at the same time, these are all aspects, this opposition, this quincunx, they're all pretty much happening at the same time. And then we have a quincunx with the North Node and the Capricorn moon. Okay, so we're taking a nosedive right now. This is where Rahu or the North Node is, taking that nosedive, like mind over matter. Like we are accepting the possibility of failure, and we're still moving forward, right? We're still kind of playing with danger in some ways, but in a way that we have led ourselves to this point, and now it's time to put our money where our mouth is, right? So the quincunx to the North Node is the moon is in this position in Capricorn that's talking about how if the rewards that we feel when we overcome our fear. So at first it seems like, well, why don't those things support each other? Well, it's because the North Node in Gemini is about the individual consciousness taking the nosedive, right, to go into this place, whereas the moon represents the rewards when we overcome fear in a collective way. What can we build together? How can we contribute to the building of larger institutions? And the Sabian symbol is an albatross feeding from the hand of a sailor, right? When we are able to overcome the fear of that which is our enemy, then we are able to reap some sort of reward, right? We can see how nature can cooperate with each other. And so this is a very interesting connection, considering that we think that, how are these things not connecting to each other? How are they going to force us? I don't know. We're going to have to find out, right? This is part of living the astrology, is having these experiences and then relating them back and be like, oh, I see how this played itself out. I would say it's because of the individual consciousness and taking the nosedive, and the thing that is going to find or how we're going to adjust ourselves is that with the moon in Capricorn, right? We're not thinking about ourselves at all. Capricorn is about the responsibility of the group, and you can't build any of these huge institutions or a corporation or anything or a society without everybody participating. And it's kind of like, are we going to be, because the albatross is feeding from the hand of the sailor, but we don't know what the sailor's intention is there. They may be trying to gather the trust of that particular bird in order to capture it, or to, in order to control it in some way. So this is something to consider as well as we, move through. And it also is the same thing. Our individual consciousness might be taking this nosedive and really not examining within us how important it is that we do overcome our fear, and that we are willing to exercise some level of trust. So you can see how it goes both ways. And again, we will be forced to adjust ourselves on some level. The moon is going to come and then square Chiron in Capricorn as well, as we talked about. I mean, it's still in Capricorn pretty much all day until tomorrow. And again, it's Chiron retrograde, like these wounds and the frustration of wanting to happen now. We want to actualize ourselves now, and the wounding of just being ourselves now becoming even more apparent with this retrograde, and really having to look within ourselves to understand it. Again, the moon in a square, right? Cross purposes. We're going to grow. They're going to come and meet each other, and then they're going to go spiraling off, right? Especially cardinal energy, Capricorn, cardinal earth, Aries, cardinal fire. There's momentum behind this energy. One is the unfolding of the material matrix of nature, right? Capricorn is the unfoldment, right? And Aries is the spark of life, right? It is the flash of electricity. It's that spark that is the essence of all life, and as it grows. And so these energies are going to be having their own momentum going in different directions, and they're going to meet, and they're going to probably spiral off. And the moon is really asking us and bringing us to a place where we can start thinking about things beyond life and death, right? The subjective quest for something beyond this interplay of life and death. And Chiron, the square to Chiron, we're just so hyper focused with Chiron and Aries in terms of our shame and our guilt for being ourselves, but also the victim narrative of things not happening fast enough. We're going to have to change, it's going to force us to change and grow when these two things meet, because it's not, internally and intuitively, we do recognize that there's something more to this than this interaction of life and death. Fire, we're able to meditate on it to see something more than what we see right in front of us. Whereas Chiron and Aries, we're kind of hyper focused on the interplay of life and death processes and our role within that. So that too is going to force us to change. It's going to force us to grow and to address our expectations in this realm. And hopefully what we can get out of this is the ability to find a way to, again, heal these wounds, to address these wounds. And it has something to do with being able to look into the fire rather than getting frustrated that it's not popping off the way that we want, and seeing that there's so much more to this process than our own individual wounding. A lot of people are still not getting this, right? And they continue to feed this process. Whereas we have this really challenging, but ultimately very beneficial square with this Capricorn moon. That's just like, okay, it is not just about me. And I feel that, and I am experiencing in this moment what it's like to consider something outside of just my own personalized, challenge to my ego. And how this day is really going to shape up, which is so beautiful, is the moon is then going to be in a conjunction with fixed star Vega. So we have a Lyran starseed activation, and it's also going to trine Uranus. Oh, wow. This is so nice. All of this like shifting and changing and like butting of heads. And by the end of the day, it's the responsibility of society ultimately to ensure the welfare and total health of the next new generation. We can't just, and that's part of the Capricorn archetype, right? Is the paternal, institutionalized providing. Right? We have to ensure the welfare and total health of the next generation, of the new generation. We have to provide for everyone, not just ourselves. And when we can come to an internal and feeling-based awareness of this, in conjunction with Vega, right, the Lyran starseeds, they understand this, and that is why they step into leadership roles. That is why they're willing to challenge themselves on a physical level, because they're fearless and they understand what it takes to really push their limits and to accomplish something beyond just what's right in front of them. This is why the Lyrans were able to explore the entire galaxy. They've also incarnated so many times in material form that it doesn't even faze them anymore. So Lyran starseeds, number one, big activation. Number two, in a trine to Uranus, the ruler of Aquarius, right? Which has been really challenging us on our collective awakening by being able to put our head down and brave the storm. So this connection by the end of today is brilliant. Beautiful trine, beautiful Earth trine that is the Lyran starseed activation is pretty strong at fixed star Vega, and finding a lot of support and structural foundational support in this trine, with the idea that it's not just about us, it's about everything and the future generations as well. And if we can embody that within us, then it's really going to help us embody the fearlessness and the strength and the courage to actually, face the disruptions in our material reality that are forcing us to face the storm. So today is really setting us up to then come into this full moon day. So let's go over that as well, right? We're going to look at the full moon. And as we now move into the 23rd, which is tomorrow, this is Friday, we're going to start here with our moon still in Capricorn. You can see here that it's going to meet Pluto. So we're also going to, Mars was in that quincunx there, and now the moon comes around and we're going to have a very direct connection to the undercurrent of what is happening within our reality, right? Within our culture, within our society. And it's going to be, whenever the moon meets Pluto, it's like all of those repressed feelings, all of that deep down in the unconscious stuff that we don't even realize is operating, it comes right up to the surface. And the moon's pretty bright at this point. I mean, it's really close to full. So be assured that you are going to have direct experience of this Pluto energy, of the undercurrent of within each of us that is way more involved in what is happening in our society than we ever could imagine, right? It's going to come right up the surface. It's going to express itself through each of us in a feeling-based way, and we're going to have a direct experience of it. I mean, there's just no two ways around it. And so in some ways, that quincunx with Mars today is really helpful to adjust ourselves, so when this moon connection comes around tomorrow with Pluto, that we have at least our warrior energy to remind us that we do have a link between us and God. We are a piece of source creator incarnate, and that is going to be what the warrior uses on his journey forward. So not only that, the sun is then going to, before this even happens, be in a quincunx with Jupiter retrograde. The sun is now officially in Leo, and these two in their 0 degrees. It's the same thing. Jupiter is expanding within us all of the possibilities. It's like the spreading out of the farmers. It's just endlessly. It's just an endless display of everything that we can interact with in terms of our collective unconscious. Anything we want. It's all there. You know, Jupiter's managing it all, and it's all within us, right? And the sun coming into the 1st degree of Leo, right? All the blood rushing to the head. We're going to really, like, that's an activation right there, isn't it? And we have to adjust ourselves because Jupiter's like, oh, I'm managing this entire space, right? While the sun is just like, hey, you know, like, I am waking up. Like, whoa, I'm waking up. And I am waking up. It's a very individualized experience. And Jupiter's like, wow, there is everything here to interact with. So again, we will have to adjust ourselves in this moment because it can be overwhelming to have this type of awakening and opening experience with the sun in its rulership of Leo, right? The blood rushing to the head, the Kundalini activating, the serpent uncoiling and moving up the spine in a completely different, it's a completely different energy and doesn't fit at all with where Jupiter is, right? And so that in itself, while the moon is in Capricorn, about to, in a sextile to Neptune, is about to meet Pluto. Okay, so the moon is also opposite, before that even happens, the moon is opposite Mercury. So the moon is showing us, again, this is more Lyran activation right here. The moon is in a position here where it's, we feel and we know that it's a relay race, right? That we can't separate ourselves from anybody else, and that each individual needs to be acting in their highest, right? They have to be acting in their most, they have to be acting and performing. That's the word I'm looking for, like an athlete, right? Every athlete is performing at their top, and then the relay race is the collective. And so this whole team gets better in reference to competition to some other team, right? So we're having an internalized awareness of this with the moon, but the opposition to Mercury is allowing us to recognize that we each have to actually be at the top of our game. And that's where Mercury in Cancer is going to represent. Like, what are the emotional rewards? What do we get back from our immediate family, environment, community, whatever, the Cancerian archetype? What do we gather from that when we are expressing our skill set in a way that really encompasses what the collective actually means. It's like an opera singer, right? So somebody is a star, right? The star in an opera. And what is an opera? But it's a story that it reflects the culture. And so this individual that is the star of the opera is at their at their top of their skill level, expressing themselves. And this is going to come through, again, our manifestation power. It's going to come through our ability to communicate. Thoughts create things, all of the mercurial energy. And it's really going to be about performing at our best, and the emotional reward that we get for that from our peers, from our family. And the opposition here with the moon, which is at home in Cancer, by the way. So there is kind of like some recognition of what this space is, but the moon is like, but remember, it's not just about us. There is, in fact, we're all doing this as part of our team. And I really like this opposition because it so easily allows us to keep this balance point between how important our individual contribution to the energetic field is, and also allowing us to feel how that actually allows the human collective to get better, right? To win the relay race, whatever it is, right? This is a really beautiful opposition. And so it is tense, but again, there's all that potential energy in that tension. It's really, really going to assist us, right, in this moment. And then the moon comes and is in a sextile with Neptune as well right after that, and Neptune has moved into the degree of being a medium where you give everything of all your own vital energy to substantiate something. And what are we giving? There is a recompense that we're each going to feel forgiving of ourselves, right? There's sextile here means that there's an investment opportunity that's harmonious, but we have to actually, work that investment. We can't it's not like a trine where you're like, whoa, these things really just hold each other up and I don't have to do anything. It's harmonious, but we have to actually invest these energies into each other. And the moon in Capricorn is a soldier receiving 2 awards for bravery. It's the social and cultural recompense for those who actually go to task for the community. And it's like when we realize within us, when we see very clearly that we can take all of the potential of the collective and the vital energy of all of us and substantiate it into something very real. When we realize that, we can invest this into our own individual, there will be something here that we can, this investment will allow us to capitalize on, which is the recompense, right? Which is society recognizing our bravery in this situation, whatever it is, whatever we're giving of ourselves. There will be a possibility here to, like I said, capitalize. And that's a big Capricorn thing, is the capitalization of the work that we put in. That's what capital really represents. It's that you put in the work, you put in the resources, and then you gather you capitalize on it. You gain resources that you can then invest back in. So this is also an incredible moment here to show us that where we can give of ourselves and how we can receive back from that situation on a personal level, because then the moon comes and meets Pluto right after that. And so then we feel that eruption, right? We feel the repressed, unconscious, dark stuff that usually is so deep down that we don't even know it exists, coming up through us emotionally, and we have to experience it very directly on the surface. And again, the moon will be very bright. So it's a good thing that we're going to have all of these opportunities to see how our own energy, how our own giving of ourselves to substantiate something will in fact fulfill us on a personal level, and we'll feel it, right? And then the moon comes to a quincunx with Mars, just like Pluto did the day before. And same basic idea here, that we are dealing with the individual expressive consciousness in Leo versus the collective ambition and contribution. And those two things, again, being quincunx, will just force us to adjust ourselves, because Mars will bring it right back to, this is all about me. And it is, to a certain extent. It has to start somewhere. It has to start with the individual tapping into this solar rebirth energy. But at the same time, we can't allow ourselves to forget entirely that it's all, nothing comes without the contribution of all of us. And that's what the opposition of Leo and Aquarius really represents, that there's no separating the individual from the collective. And in fact, the individual influences the collective whole. So by the time we get to, in fact, the full moon at the end of the day, that is where we're going to see the spread of that collective experience, or that individual experience, the awakening, the individual awakening moment that comes with the first degree of Leo, that then spreads throughout the body, just like the blood rushing then moves throughout the whole body, and in fact can move. The individual experience can move through the collective and be infectious in some ways. And this full moon is going to show us, how important it is to realize that regardless of what it is that gets activated for us in terms of our expression, our passion, our joy, right? Because that's another Leo energy, joy, leadership, regalness, sovereignness. When that spreads out to others, it can cause unexpected changes, and we're going to feel those unexpected changes within us. They can be really dramatic, and we're going to see what it is that we need to let go of, or what it is that we have cultivated so far in this lunar cycle that we can utilize to find our balance, be the bubble in the level, and when everything is just falling all over the place, right? So that is the essence of the full moon. We're going to see a lot of what we're made of and how we can keep ourselves aloof and somewhat detached, and future oriented, innovative, right? Thinking outside of the box, feeling outside of the box. And Moon in Aquarius, it's not that it's robotic. It's just your emotions are not what is. Whereas in Leo, it's very much about the individual expressing themselves. In Aquarius, especially Moon in Aquarius, you are able, the Moon in Aquarius, it is a little aloof and detached because it's not the emotions that are making the decisions. It is being tapped in enough to your feeling state in order to trust the larger picture and to trust nature and to not get caught up in the drama. The Leo is all about drama. All about it. And there's nothing wrong with that because it is the drama in our stories that is what compels us, right? And this is what draws us in. Aquarius is the opposite of drama. It is the energy that is infused throughout the entire collective, but each of us has to be sovereign. So that's the full moon. And as we move through the weekend, right, we're going to have some interesting, the moon will be in Aquarius. It's going to trine the North Node. Let's look at that. The moon's going to trine the North Node. Here it is right here. And sorry, let me find, there we go. It's going to quincunx Venus now in Virgo, right? It's going to trine, there's going to be a trine to the North Node, which is, when we realize that when we don't project our shit onto other people or and see people for who they are, like really, really realize and deal with people as actual people rather than screens that we project ourselves or our expectations onto. When we're able to embody that, it's really going to actually assist in where we are collectively going on a soul level, which in fact is this individual consciousness nosedive, right? Mind over matter. But we have to be real with what's happening. We have to feel within us that we ourselves are also just human beings and that people project onto us all of the time. And so when we can embody that, I think that that'll really assist in the structural foundation with this air trine with the North Node, right? That is really challenging us to really step up our game, right? Individually on a consciousness level, right? Do the nosedive. That's how we're going to grow. This is the collective. Rahu is pulling us in the direction that we need to go in order to evolve collectively. And that means we're going to have to play with danger a little bit. We're going to have to be willing to, commit to this process, regardless if we fail or not. It's mind over matter and we go for it. And so if we become much more aware of the fact that we're all human beings, I think this is really going to help this process. And we don't the nosedive doesn't become like a descent into our own personal hell, right? Because that's when we realize that we're not who we are, or we realize that other people are not who we projected our expectations onto, but they're just people. That could very well lead to, like I said, a descent into our own personal hell and kind of sabotage some things as well. So we have to be aware of that not everybody's going to handle that level of awareness or realization in the same way. Mercury then comes into a trine with Neptune. As you can see here, Mercury in Cancer comes into a trine, this beautiful water trine. And this is when those of us in a society who are kind of ahead of the curve, the critics, the poets, the writers, the people that are on the leading edge of the subconscious of the collective, but are able to put it into a conscious form, the critical analysis that is able to happen here is very strong, but it's usually a very small amount of people, and they bring to conscious awareness what most people don't even realize is embedded in their own subconscious. And so this trine here, again, when we come to realize the things, be ahead of the curve, or listen to those who are, in fact, be willing to at least listen to those who are in some ways ahead of the curve. This, again, will allow us to substantiate our conscious ideals, right? If we are not willing to, or if we're being unnecessarily critical, because we're really just dealing with our own emotional vulnerability, our own self-esteem. That's where Cancer, that's where it's developed, is our self-esteem, right? And our sense of self-worth. If it is not intact and we are having a hard time really listening to the critique that is being offered, again, it will have us substantiate our unconscious desires, right? Which is to continue to tear people down, or, not put our head in the sand and reinforce the same script over and over again. So again, it's all about how we look at these situations, how we interpret them on our own, on our own playing field, that determines how they really become expressed in our lives. But it's still a beautiful water trine, right? It has to do with the ability to really conceptualize how we are feeling, and allow our manifesting mind to tap into our intuition and the core of who we are, in order to, in fact, substantiate a conscious ideal, to give of ourselves entirely to the collective. This is going to be really determined as well by how we interact with this full moon. And then the moon comes into a conjunction with Saturn. So that, again, really reinforces on a very personal level. And when the moon meets Saturn, our feelings kind of like get very serious, and they bump up against a wall, just like Saturn is the wall. And so sometimes that, again, it can be kind of depressing. It can be kind of just like I said, very serious, and not a lot of room for indulging our emotional state. It's really about getting down to business. And when we meet Saturn, who, like I said, is in its rulership in Aquarius, at the very least, the aloofness and the detachment will allow us on some level to actually be able to access a silent space, right? We're gonna need to intuitively access a space where all the other noise is pushed aside, so that we can get pure inspiration. And Saturn is not, like I said, that is the structure that Saturn is providing within us right now. There's nothing else to gain other than allowing ourselves into the space. And when the moon comes and meets Saturn, it's really going to allow us to plug into that. And this is going to be very helpful if we realize what it is for. Moon comes around and is in a sextile to Chiron right after that. And so again, this other investment opportunity, where the barometer of our own intuitive nature, as a result of the inspiration we just received in our connection to Saturn, and it's going to be kind of I feel like it will be kind of a hard wall, right? Because that's what Saturn is. Like, there's no getting around the fact that the only real new inspiration is going to come from within us and our own ability to shutter out the rest of the noise. Once that happens, then our intuitive sense, our adaptability, our feeling landscape of the moon is like a barometer at that point, where we can measure the change in pressure and make reasonable predictions about, or forecast what's going to happen with the weather. And so again, we can invest this energy into where Chiron is, because we can say, well, if I engage in things in this way, in terms of reinforcing my victimhood, or, really falling into woe is me about my shame and guilt, or then I'm going to see how acting out of that is going to affect things. And this is really the aloofness and the detachment of the moon Aquarius is really going to work in our favor right now, so that we can actually be able to see and to forecast what's coming, right, within ourselves, using our own intuitive ability as the barometer. And we can apply that to, a thought exercise here with Chiron retrograde in Aries of like, if I try to push the status quo, or if I try to heal my wounding by bypassing it entirely and forcing things to happen, this is most likely what will happen. So we're going to learn a lot about ourselves in this weekend, I think. And also see a lot of really clear indications of what we are collectively capable of when we are all on the same resonance. Now, from here, the moon comes into a square with Uranus. Well, this is kind of a mutual reception type of energy, not entirely, because Uranus rules Aquarius. The moon is exalted in Taurus. And so there is an understanding between these two energies when they're in a square. So there is a way that they can, it's like when they meet, they can exchange their energetic resonance with each other and actually learn way more than they might have otherwise, because there's a familiarity there, right? And so the moon at this position of Aquarius is going to, are we able, this goes back to the full moon now, because now it's way more pronounced of, are we going to be able to sit happily like two little lovebirds on a fence, and receive the blessings of our own achievements spiritually in the face of Uranus? That's like, remember, you got to put your head down and go through the storm. Like, there's no getting around that. That is what has to happen right now. You can't get around the storm. You can't go under the storm. You can't go over it. You actually have to just put your head down and pop your collar and go through it. And this is the pathway of our collective awakening with Uranus. But the moon is, again, are we going to be that bubble, that balance within the level, while, in the face of this very strong fixed square, right? With each other. But that's the thing. The moon being exalted in Taurus will be like, yes, I emotionally and intuitively understand what it's like to be embedded in the medium of our growth, the natural rhythm of life, which is what Taurus represents. And Uranus is going to be like, oh yeah, I can just transcend all of this, like, physically. That's right. Because I'm Uranus and I am the collective third eye. So that is outside. It's not outside of the rhythm of nature, but it's in the world, but not of it. And this square is going to really challenge this, but in fact, this is going to really, really help us in the end. And it's probably going to be very obvious, right? It's going to be fixed. It's going to be a fixed square, and it's going to be in terms of a very material reality of Taurus, and then the Aquarian nature of our ability to trust nature at the same time through our own feeling state. This is it's going to be incredible, but I have a feeling it's going to be very disruptive. So when we get to Sunday, which is the 25th, we are going to really wrap up a lot of this. Obviously, we're going to wrap up the weekend, and then we're going to start addressing the themes for the rest of this lunar cycle, so we can see where things are going. So we, where are we at here? So the moon is still in Aquarius. It's going to quincunx Mercury, in that need to adjust ourselves. Mercury is in 26 degrees Cancer, 26 degrees Aquarius. We always round up for the Sabian symbols. And, we do, in some ways, we want to be comfortable. Like, we are at our best and in terms of absorbing information, when we feel safe, when we feel comfortable, when our self-esteem is intact, right? We're not being attacked emotionally because we're protected by something. The issue here that the quincunx is really about how we can use our mental efficiency and our intellect and our coherence to the natural energy throughout the collective, right? That's the Aquarian energy. We can each use those skills and those tools and that equipment to to actually measure the power. Okay, let me take this back for a minute. So we know that water conducts electricity, right? And if you want to test a battery in a car, and if the power in a battery in a car, for instance, right? And what's a battery but a storage device for energy? If you want to test it, you use a hydrometer, right? You use a tool that measures the moisture in the battery, right? And so we each have this opportunity to utilize that very natural skill set within us, and measure the conductivity of our own storage of power, right? Which is the collective. The collective is like the battery that holds the moisture, that holds the energy that moves through it. We can use what we're learning in this skill set and certain types of equipment, right? Like I said, and we can think about this as all energetic equipment. We can use that in the face of feeling like we need a very safe environment in order to really do our manifesting in, right? And it's not to say that we have to figure out how to do it when we're not safe. It's more about that we have to be willing to, again, Mercury or Aquarius is about cosmic coherence. So we feel where the balance is and we feel where the imbalance is. And we're using our mental and intellectual skill and acuity in order to figure that out. Whereas Mercury is just like, I just need the protection in order to really do my work. And the moon is going to be like, well, it's going to lead us to a place. It's like we have to be able to measure if there's even any, if this collective that or this group that we find ourselves in is even going to allow for that to happen. So again, another adjustment that we have to make along the way. Mercury comes into and this is because Mercury is going to come into an opposition with Pluto, okay, at the very, very same time, which means that these two are in a semi-sextile, right? And they're only one sign away, 30 degrees. So it's very subtle. It's a very subtle but harmonious connection here. It's something that's considered a minor aspect. So at the same time this is happening, Mercury and Pluto are in opposition to each other, which is even more impactful in this moment, where again, our manifestation potential is really needing and wanting to be in a safe and comfortable encompassed environment in order to take in information and to process information and to really gather more information. Whereas Pluto is going to be like, well, you know what? I'm pulling back all of that and I'm showing you what's underneath the surface within you that is so much deeper and darker and more relevant to your conscious awareness than you think, right? And so on the one hand, we may think that we need this like protection of our immediate family and nation and in these groups in order to, we need the containment system in order to really gather our intellectual property, right? We want to educate ourselves. We want to bring in more information, but we feel our minds are going to really want that protection and that emotional protection. And Pluto is just really going to challenge this because we are going to see that what we maybe thought was protecting us is in fact really what's underneath the surface is so much darker. And so, you know what I mean? We're just going to have to contend with it within ourselves. That's what Pluto retrograde really represents here. So, and at the same time, the quincunx here, this is a saving grace in some ways because the moon in Aquarius is like, okay, well, I'm going to take myself out of the emotions and I'm going to use my emotional capacity right now to measure the undercurrents here and really what's going on and is this battery healthy, right? That I am, is it actually a good storage device? Is it able to hold the power? And we're going to come to that conclusion. Each of us, we're going to come to that conclusion by the end of this weekend. With where we have found ourselves, where our loyalty is placed, because Cancer is about that, the loyalty and our faithfulness. Whom do you serve? We're going to come head on with that. And the moon in Aquarius, as much as it's going to be an inconjunct, it will in fact kind of give us this opportunity to in fact adjust ourselves after a fall from grace, because that's really what this opposition is going to set us up for, right? The tension there. You don't want to get caught, again, you don't want to just like get caught up in where Pluto is and just be like, oh, it's over. A lot of people are in that place right now. Like, oh my God, I had no idea. How can we ever possibly contend with this? But don't forget that Pluto is our power of transformation, right? It's not just death and that's the end of it. Death is the precursor to transformation. So we have to see it that way. But it's going to be, it's going to challenge our feelings of safety and who we've been loyal and faithful to this whole time. And do we need that in order to really educate and gather more information? We're going to have to answer that for ourselves. And the moon in Aquarius is really going to allow us the opportunity to detach from the emotional aspect of that so we can see things clearly, but also feel what's going on. Use our resonance, use our intuitive nature to actually feel what's going on, like actually feel what's going on in the collective. And then the moon moves into Pisces, right? Right after that, the moon moves into Pisces and meets Jupiter, right? And so that moon loves to be in Pisces, there's a lot of connection there. And so we are in fact going to have a massive expansion within our own personalized emotional experience of everything that we have access to in the collective. What a dissipating and potentially, what a dissipating experience. I mean, we could really lose ourselves here. Thankfully, Jupiter is here, but Jupiter's mutable too. There's no real boundary here, but there's a benefactor here. That's what I'm trying to say. There's management here. There is good fortune here as well. And it really all depends on the value system and the paradigms that Jupiter is representing for us. It's really going to make that very inseparable from us personally when the moon comes into Jupiter. So this is really going to sum up the weekend. So let's look at what's going to be happening for the rest of this week, so we get a sense of where we're going here. So Mercury comes into Leo. That's a big one. So this is coming into next week, and we'll be together every day. I'll do my transmissions as usual, so we'll get way more into these daily energies. But, Mercury's going to come into Leo. Jupiter is going to ingress back into Aquarius, so there's more shifting. Our minds and our manifestation potential, our consciousness that Mercury represents is not only going to also erupt and combust in some ways, but it's also going to meet the sun in Cazimi at 10 degrees, right? By the end of the month. What else is happening? We'll get into that. Mars is going to be opposite Jupiter before, and we talked about this too. Let's go back for a second. Mars at the end of Leo, right? That's unsealed letter. I talked about President Trump. His ascendant is at 29 degrees Leo. Mars is in conjunction with his ascendant, right? So this opposition so we're looking at the 29th. So next Thursday, we're looking at this really coming to a head in opposition to Jupiter, which is now in Aquarius. This is going to be the next full moon. 29 degrees Leo, 29 degrees Aquarius. So just keep that in mind. Now, Mars and Jupiter in an opposition is actually a really great energy. All of these oppositions are actually providing a lot of opportunities to harness a lot of energy. But this in particular really activates a lot, because the tension between Mars as the warrior and Jupiter as the leader is actually really beneficial. Right? There's so much potential energy that's generated from this tension that we really can get a lot of, we can we could just really merge very directly with the individual sovereign nature of Leo in its opposition to the totality of the consciousness that the last degree of Aquarius represents. So just keep this in mind. We'll talk way more about this as it gets closer, but this, again, the next full moon is going to be at this same degree, the same opposition. So they're going to be bigger activations that will then reflect themselves on a personal level next month at the next full moon. So this is really important to just keep in mind. Mars is then going to enter Virgo as well, and then it's time for Mars to get down to work too, right? And so Mars is a little bit more comfortable actually acting on things, but not as intuitive, right? And so this is going to help balance out where Venus is not really wanting to act on things, but is very sensitive and intuitive. So again, we're going to start really getting down to business here within us individually, right? Within ourselves, reconstituting ourselves, being on the path of actual discipleship, whatever that means to you. That's where the Virgo energy is the most useful. And then, the sun and the moon come into a square. Let's see here. It's going to be another fixed square where the moon is going to be in Taurus. This is our waning third quarter square. This is going to be a crisis in consciousness here. And it's going to really determine, are we going to focus and be focused on our individual ability to shape reality, right, with the sun, or where we're going to meet the resistance with the square here, as you see. And this is, a T-square in some ways with the sun and Saturn, right? You have this, and it's this Uranus, and the moon is providing that point here, because we want to be, we want to shape the reality, don't we? We want to shape our reality, but we also have to live with where Saturn is, which is that it's much more about, taking that stillness in order to receive the inspiration, receive the insight that is truly pure and not based on anybody else's manipulation of the situation. It's going to, the balance here with this third quarter square with the moon in Taurus, who is exalted in Taurus, that means she's also going to meet Uranus at the same day here, is that do we have the ability emotionally, intuitively, at the core of who we are, in our subconscious, to actually make the most out of a dark situation that is just part of the natural process here? It's nature, right? It's like bringing the tree in, the Yule tree, and decorating it. You're creating happiness in a time that's naturally dark. This is going to be this third quarter square. Not only is it going to provide that opportunity for change and the crisis in our consciousness that started, based off the new moon of what we sanctified in our productive relationships in our life, it's also going to be the release point for this tension between the sun and Saturn, which is going to be coming very quickly. So when we get to this third quarter moon, it's really going to show us, we don't want to be in one place or the other necessarily. We have to realize that on some level, we have to take initiative to shape our reality. But at the same time, we do have to have the ability internally and on a personal level to create happiness in a naturally dark situation, right? And so, because what's going to happen is we're going to have this cazimi, right? Mercury, where are we here? We're going to have this Mercury cazimi, right? Sun and Mercury come together, 10 degrees Leo. It's going to be very exalted. It's going to be an awakening moment. We're going to be like totally inspired. We're going to realize that we are coming out of a period of darkness, right? It's like the morning dew as the sun is coming up. We're just like, oh wow, like we came out of this dark period. It's going to be this awakening moment here, and very illuminating, very powerful, very much like the Kundalini moving up through the crown, the third eye and the crown chakra, like just total awakening in this moment. And then it'll come and immediately find its opposition to Saturn, which is going to be really hard, right? It's going to be really hard because we're going to want to activate on this very personally, individually, and we are going to have to find the balance here with this opposition. And remember, it's going to go back to where this moon is in a square to the sun. It's going to meet Uranus again about being able to brave the storm, being able to find that stillness within us in order to receive inspiration and allow that to balance out this really incredibly potent energy here. I'm not trying to downplay or say that this is inappropriate. This is incredible. This is incredible energy of awakening here. But we want to be able, there's a reason that it's balanced out here with Saturn. And that third quarter moon is going to really show us where our consciousness needs to be in order to really get through the rest of this lunar cycle, because that's going to happen. Mercury opposed Saturn, Sun opposed Saturn. Mercury is then going to come into a trine with Chiron. Let's see when that is. As we get closer, we're in the last week here. We're almost done, guys. Just bear with me. This is a lot of information, I know, but Mercury is going to be in a trine with Chiron as well. So this is, where are we at? Mercury trine Chiron. This is the ship captain, right? The old retired ship captain. This is, again, going to challenge our ability to stay centered, to be in the motion of vacillation back and forth, but also at the same time. And this goes back to this opposition with Saturn, because we need something to stabilize us as our consciousness is going to start wildly vacillating, right? And in some ways, it's going to be very joyful for some people. Other people, it may be really scary or just really disorienting. Just like when the Kundalini activates and you have this full third eye opening and you're just like, what is happening? And people kind of go crazy, right? They have psychosis in these moments. So it's going to be reflected a lot differently for people, but Saturn is going to allow us to, it's going to be that oak tree that the swing is tied to. And so even though our consciousness individually is going to sway all over the place, we at least can have something stable that holds that while we are dealing with and integrating this incredible moment here. And that's what's going to be happening. And then Mercury, like I said, comes into a trine with Chiron. And this, again, is going to test our ability to be in the world, but not of it, to remember all of our past experiences of joy and failure and be able to be in a rhythm in it or with it, but not be directly in it again. And this, again, is going to allow for a real healing moment here and not to feed the Chiron wound. It's going to be very tempting to do so, right? Because you can see Venus is earlier going to be in a quincunx here, but we'll talk about that when the time comes. These are big themes that I want to address. And then Venus, speaking of Venus, in a trine to Uranus. This is a Syrian marking, so keep that in mind. Where Venus is, it'll be at 14 to 15 degrees Virgo, which is a Syrian starseed marking, and in a trine to Uranus. Wow, wow, wow. Again, this is very structurally sound with where Uranus is, and there will be some measure of receiving and recognizing and valuing ourselves as part of a much larger lineage that will really support where Uranus is completely disrupting reality all the time. So we have Venus that's going to trine Uranus, and then but Mercury is then going to come around and square it, right? So it's this push and pull back and forth, because Virgo is very much about getting down into the soil, doing the work under the surface, really getting into the depth of who we are in order to sustain and grow ourselves. Whereas Leo, again, is that combustive solar energy. So Mercury is going to be like, I'm on a parade float going through town, and it's going to turn a corner. And we've talked about this before. It's going to turn a corner, and it's going to be like, oh shit, there's a big storm cloud right there. What am I going to do? That square is going to be right in our faces. And the sun is not far behind in that same thing. And that's really going to challenge us too when the sun gets to that point. Big time. The sun's squaring Uranus, like our expression of who we are, right? The blossoming of our nature, identity, like this solar energy is just going to really, there's going to be a lot of irritation, anxiety, confusion in a lot of ways, because they're like, I thought that this was all well and good. And then, like I said, you turn the corner and you're like, there's a tornado right in front of me. What are we going to do now? And it's really going to test some things at that point. But the trine with Venus and Uranus right before that happens is the Syrian marking, right? The reminder here that we manifest our reality through transmission of actual vibration, either through sound, our speech, trance, dancing, drumming, chanting, toning, all of the things that are naturally able, and where we feed our, what is it that we give our energy to that we want to create? It's going to bring our attention back to this. So by the end of this lunar cycle, we're going to come to a new moon on the 8th. Here we go. New moon on the 8th. At 16 to 17 degrees Leo, and this is going to be the moment where we step forward and that we make a decision within ourselves to step forward as an individual but be part of something together, right? That's when we are going to decide what we actually are going to participate in together, and then August is going to be all about that, and we'll have that full moon again in Aquarius during that lunar cycle. So guys, I know that's a lot of information, and I just have to go through it so that you see how it all plays together. So I appreciate if you're still with me. If you're on the replay, there's certainly, you can go back and listen to it. That's always an option. There's always things that come out. When I do personal readings for people and send them their recordings, they, listen multiple times. They take notes, right? And I do the same thing because different things pop out into our awareness at different times, depending on what's going on. That's why I'm very thorough and I let it all come out in these long, these bigger chunks, because the reality is that there's so many nuggets in here that if you go through it, different things are going to pop out at the right time when you need to hear them. So it's a lot more. There's a lot more to engage with here as opposed to trying to give you a sound bite of things. And I'm not saying that that's a bad thing. And I know that most people, that's what they want. They want their convenient sound bite, but that's also not really helping you actually process the information for yourself, to use your own intuition with each step of the way to see how that you respond to it. So, We'll be together next week. Tomorrow, there's no transmission. I'll be off the grid for the weekend, so I'm sure there'll be some updates on social media as we go along. But I really also encourage people to take some time for themselves during this full moon, because we're really going to need it as we go through the rest of this lunar cycle and prepare for the next new moon in Leo in August, because that's going to really determine where we decide to invest our own energy into a collective process, right? And right now, this lunar cycle is still fulfilling and and growing the intention that we set for our own stabilization, our own emotional stabilization with a new moon in Cancer, okay? So you guys, I love you so much. Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate each and every one of you. You know the drill. Everything's in the description box. You can book a reading through the website. You know, there's a lot of information on the website in terms of my services, testimonials, my story. So you can get a better sense of what I have to offer if you go there. But in the meantime, have a great weekend. Enjoy the full moon. Think of yourself as the little bubble in the level and how you're going to find your center in the midst of probably some very unexpected changes that come about as the result of the sun moving into its home territory of Leo, right? Things are about to pop off, aren't they? Even if it's just within us, I do feel like a major shift is, you know, things are locking themselves into place for the next installment of reality on Earth right now. So, guys, take care of yourselves. We'll check in on Monday. Okay, love you. Bye.